For this project, we're looking at fair division in taking turns and the divide and choose sections in Chapter 13. We will pick apart these topics using real-life examples. We want our classmates to really understand how this can be used in everyday life and how it is used more often than we would think. Fair division is a procedure that settles any dispute involving either objects or issues with a certain mathematical guarantee of fairness. This happens when the demands or desires of one party are in conflict with those of another, be it a divorce, a labor management negotiation, or an international dispute. No one wants to be treated unfairly. The first procedure we will be looking into is taking turns. This is pretty self-explanatory. When two parties are present, one picks an object, and then the next party picks another object, and so on. Taking turns choosing sides or picking teammates on the playground is an early lesson in our lifetime. However, today we will be talking about terms of importance, such as the issues of property settlements in divorce. To begin, we must think about fairness regarding taking turns. Because choosing first is often quite an advantage, we must be able to compensate the other party in some way, possibly by giving them an extra choice on their next turn. In spite of this, tossing a coin may often solve the issue of which party gets to choose first. More importantly, we ought to pursue efficiency while taking turns. In this case, we naturally choose the objects that we favor the most in order of our preferences. However, this is not always the optimal way, because if we knew nothing of the opposing party's preferences, then we could assume that they will choose sincerely, selecting at their turn whichever object they prefer the most from those not chosen yet. But what if we did know about the opposing party's preferences? We could then pick the object that they favor the most and perhaps end up with a better deal in general, providing an optimal result. This process is known as something called the bottom-up strategy.
Now that you've learned the basic information on how taking turns works, it's time to introduce you to divide and choose. Imagine a situation where there are two parties, both of which that want to place their claim on the same object of their attention. How do they come to an agreement? By dividing and choosing. Divide and choose is when one party divides the object into two parts in any way that they desire, and the other party chooses whichever part they want. The best example of this would be the 1994 Convention of the Law of the Sea, also known as the Law of the Sea Treaty, which protects the interests of developing countries by following the fair division procedure and providing at least the minimal degree of satisfaction needed. Next, we move on to divide and choose. As mentioned once before, divide and choose is dividing an object into parts for parties to pick and choose from. In a way, it's not all that different from taking turns. Now, think of that TV show you may or may not have watched or heard of called The Voice. Contestants go up to sing on stage while staying anonymous to the judges, and if the judges like their voice, they turn their chair to let the contestant know they want to coach them. The judges must be very picky with who they choose to join their team, since they may only pick a certain number of people. Although, in the end, it comes down to the contestant on which judge that turn for them that they wish to go with. This is just one example of divide and choose related to life. As for where it is used, it is typically common in the scenario where countries divide land and resources amongst each other. For example, in Jerusalem, there is a battle for the Holy Land. Both the Jews and Muslims cannot settle on splitting the area without conflict. It's a constant issue in the area, and with religion around the world, if they were to use divide and choose, there would be fair and equal method to splitting this land and living in peace. Another example of something that could benefit from divide and choose would be the conflict over oil in Saudi Arabia and Iran. Since they are feuding, oil prices are dropping dramatically. If they could use the divide and choose method, they could each work out a way to have their own control over oil. And one more example would be splitting group project work between group members.
With such a relatable topic, it's no secret that there are lots of people out there doing things to further its importance. For the taking turns theory, we chose to shine a light on one man named J.J. Gibson, an American psychologist who is considered one of the most important in the field of visual perception. He also came up with something called the bottoms-up theory. This theory is a strategy of information processing, knowledge ordering. They are often seen as a thinking and teaching style. Bottoms-up theory is a method where, in a business, plans are developed at the lowest level of the firm. These plans are then channeled through the next higher level for the participation until they reach the board of directors at the top for final approval. It relates to taking turns because each group of people in the business comes up with an idea which is then passed on to the next group higher up, and then the next group higher up, and so on. Taking turns provides them to have a collective idea passed on from each group of people. For divide and choose, we looked at the example in the book on page 466 about Aesop. The excerpt is from The Lion's Share, which is from Aesop's Fables, which you've probably heard of. You may be thinking, how can these children's stories be relating to math? But guess what? It does. In short, there are three animals, a lion, a fox, and an ass. The division is shown between the three and how they choose to sort their food. It ends up being a little morbid and survival of the fittest for a children's story, but that's beside the point. Since the lion ate the ass, he has the small morsel of food, leaving the fox the rest of the hunt, since he was already full of the ass. This is a true example of divide and choose. Both Gibson and Aesop are important to these two theories for those reasons. You've learned about taking turns and divide and choose and how they can solve everyday issues. To refresh your memory, taking turns is when there are two parties, and one party selects an object, and then the other party selects one, and then the first party again, and so on. With divide and choose, one party divides the object into two parts in any way that he desires, and the other party chooses whichever part she wants. We went over flipping a coin, and the bottoms-up theory, and the voice, land controversy, oil, and working together in a group. We hope that you can take what you learned and use divide and choose and taking turns in your everyday life.